Everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Speeki webinar series. My name is Scott Lane and I'm going to be your leader of today's webinar. For those of you who have not attended a Speeki webinar before, welcome to our session. The Speeki webinars have been going for almost 2 years now and are focused on giving you as much information on a topic as we can within a 30-minute period. As a result, the webinars do go very quickly and are packed with a lot of information. While we are happy to take questions throughout the webinar in the chat function, to be honest, we often don't get time to get to them. However, I do commit to getting back to everybody who asks questions, and so feel free to do so, and I'll get back to you after the webinar. For those of you that are joining again, welcome back. Today's webinar is focused on a different topic to that which we normally cover in the Speeki webinar series. Most of the webinars are focused on a particular topic within the ESG and sustainability spectrum. Today is slightly different because we're focused on sustainability management itself. That is, the Chief Sustainability Officers and those in the sustainability teams. And we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that it has for members of those teams to operate. And so a slightly different focus, but one I hope that you will find very interesting. So welcome to this edition of the Speeki webinar. So let's get started. So firstly, the little bit of background on this topic. Over the last 4 or 5 months, I've had the opportunity of speaking with hundreds of people in the sustainability area, particularly at events in both the US, also in Europe, and more recently in Asia. Talking to over 100 chief sustainability officers or members of the sustainability teams has given me some insights into this particular function in companies. And it's some of those insights that we're going to be talking about today. Now, as you'll see from the topic of today, we're focused on the top 5 sustainability challenges. Well, if anything I've learned from chatting to sustainability officers, there's a lot more than 5 challenges. So today I have selected 5, however, recognize that there are quite a few more, and indeed some which you may think are higher priority. So we're going to identify those 5 challenges, and we're going to walk through some of the solutions around addressing some of those 5 challenges. At the outset, what I'll say is that the diversity of the sustainability managers is quite significant. It is a very broad group of people that have come from very broad backgrounds, which we'll discuss in a moment. But what is very clear is that it is somewhat of a moving target, meaning the sustainability function itself is ever evolving, just like ESG and sustainability. So as we go through these 5, you will see some of the challenges that you may be experiencing and hopefully provide some solutions. At the end of each of the Speeki webinars, we provide a top 5. So not to be confused, we have 5 challenges, but then we have a separate top 5 at the end. That is the top 5 things that we recommend that you focus on if you are in a sustainability role and you are carving out your territory, so to speak. So let's start with the 5 sustainability challenges and some of their solutions. Now, firstly, let's talk about the role itself, because indeed that is one of the challenges. In talking to a number of sustainability people, it's very clear that the role of the sustainability office, the Chief Sustainability Officer, managers, is still developing. Now, some companies have had these roles for some time, And typically, those roles have been very focused on climate and setting goals around the environment. However, they are mostly still developing. What we've also seen is that the role itself is also developing in terms of where it reports in the organization. Many of you that I've spoken to wish that the role reports to the CEO. And indeed, in an ideal world, that is exactly where it should report, to the CEO. However, many of them do not. And we'll see in a moment where they come from. What we are seeing, though, is that the role itself is being filled with a very vast group of people with a very diverse background. That in itself can be a challenge, but is also one of the great factors of being in the sustainability industry, in that it is attracting a very diverse group of people from very diverse backgrounds, and it's adding a lot of dimensions to the sustainability area. You can see on the screen some of the roles that were common where people came to sustainability from. And when I say they come to sustainability, either they're in the role officially as a sustainability officer, or they're serving that role in addition to their other roles, which is also one of the challenges. So we've seen people come to the area from legal and compliance. We've seen them come from finance, but we've also seen them come from the data science area. So typically, these people would be involved in the data collection side of ESG reporting. So a very broad spectrum of places from which people come into the sustainability area. So the obvious challenge with the role is defining what the role is, where it sits, where it's positioned in the organization, and the skill sets that we need to be successful in that sustainability role. So some of the solutions, well, some of them you may already expect, but certainly getting access to the CEO and the C-suite is pretty much the role or the intent for any function in a company. Everyone wants to report to the CEO. It's very common for CEOs to try and distance themselves from some of these key roles. They simply don't want to have that many direct reports. In many cases, they might shift people to underneath an operations role, or maybe a finance role, or perhaps even a chief of staff type role. But if you're a sustainability officer that's keen to report to the CEO, which I believe is the right position, then it's important to earn that seat at the table. And so earning that seat at the table is relatively simple in the sustainability world, because we can truly show value to the organization through sustainability. And if we want to get on the table of the CEO, then we need to make sure that we are adding value and that we can prove that we're adding value. And that means having a business-focused mindset. That means having sustainability as part of the corporate strategy and making sure that the corporate strategy includes sustainability. So it is a very key element to show the C-suite that you understand the business and that you understand how to make the business more efficient, more effective, more attractive to investors, to customers, to employees and others by building a more sustainable practice. On an individual level, it will also mean upskilling your own skills when it comes to sustainability matters. That often involves getting engaged in forums and getting engaged in learning around sustainability topics. And that typically will be writing articles or presenting at conferences or being involved in conferences themselves. So part of this exercise is to focus on the individual branding that you might need as part of your initiatives. part of that will be involved in getting branding around your role as the sustainability officer. Moving to the second challenge for today, the activities. So what's included in the Chief Sustainability role? Well, firstly, the Chief Sustainability role has quite a lot of activities. If you talk to sustainability officers that have been in the company for some time, they are typically involved in areas around environment and climate change. In most cases, people are now involved in sustainability reporting and the endless and thankless task of building the data set required for sustainability reporting. And a lot of that involves GHG emissions accounting. What we have noticed is that few people have got the time to be involved in board level support and training, working with the executive teams and working with management teams in order to upskill them when it comes to sustainable practices. We've also seen that some of the challenges around the S and the G. For those who have attended Speeki webinars before or have attended the Speeki Academy, you'll know that we're very focused at Speeki on the S and the G, because in our view, if you are not considering S, G, and of course E together, then the foundation elements of ESG and sustainability will be lacking. So when we have been talking to people, there has definitely been some challenges around getting to the S and the G and getting preoccupied on the E side. Many of you also have spoken about budgets, the challenge of getting finance and funding for some of your sustainability initiatives. Talking to many of you, especially those in Asia, it seems that the sustainability function has been appointed, someone's been moved into that position, but has lacked some of the key elements. The key elements of funding, financials, and of course, the budgets that go along with it. So what's the solution to the activities? Well, firstly, some of the solutions is to know a little about a lot of things. The E, S, and G is a broad spectrum of topics. Understanding a little about each of them is actually very important to the sustainability journey. I've often found that engaging senior managers and board levels on sustainability is really important, starting at the top of the organization and coming down. There isn't quite enough time spent on board and senior management training and development. There's an expectation that people in those senior levels understand sustainability practices. Often, well, they don't. Sometimes they are very focused on their own roles and don't quite understand the nuances of new sustainability practices. So spending the time with board and senior management will definitely pay off. It will enable you to operate at a different level. It will provide much more insight to the business and enable them to get more involved in the sustainability strategy. Now, in order to do that, often you'll need to free up your time. One of the challenges I mentioned is that there's too many things to do and not enough time to do it. So the focus will be, as you start working at those executive levels and getting that buy-in and support, is to free up your time. And the way to do that is, frankly, through automation, finding ways to automate and use technology more effectively. At a recent event, I spoke to probably 20 people and said, tell me about sort of what automation you use. And the answer that I got back was mostly Excel. Now, clearly, there's some limitations around Excel, as great as it is, and the ability for it to scale to be a sustainability management system. So in order to get that time to be more strategic, to engage with the business, to work on training and more strategy related matters, some automation is going to be necessary. There are now, as we'll discuss in a moment, a significant amount of automation tools. In fact, the market is flooded with tools and systems in order to automate parts of sustainability. So again, it comes back to that budget question and whether we've got the resources that we need to be successful. But there are definitely solutions to reducing time and increasing capacity, and a lot of that comes with focus and automation. The third challenge that people talked about was the human factors. Now, I've used the word human factors here because it's a word that I think summarizes some of the challenges very well. And the challenge is that to do sustainability well requires a lot of behavioral change. It requires people to change their habits. It requires our employees to think differently. It may require some change management. There's a number of habits that need to be formed in the process of sustainability practices. Likewise, the setting of goals and the following of goals and the adoption of goals and actually practicing and driving towards goals can also be quite challenging because humans, by their nature, don't always look out as far as what some of these goals are expecting. And of course, there are some natural human tendencies. Again, those human factors, the biases that we have as humans that mean that we're probably more unsustainable than we are sustainable based on our status quo and what we're used to. So building a sustainability strategy, there's a whole raft of human factors that are getting in our way, making our life more difficult to spread the message, to gain buy-in, and to get traction. The solutions for human factors is around culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, as we've heard many times from the famous saying. Indeed, understanding culture and understanding behaviours and the habits which form those behaviours is actually key to understanding those human factors and how the humans work to your advantage, not disadvantage, in working towards sustainability goals. But to do so requires a little bit of nuanced understanding of some of the human factors themselves, some of the cognitive biases and some of the different types of ways that humans react to certain situations. In fact, I included a QR code on the screen for an article which is, I have to be honest, is quite detailed and is very academic, but it does walk through some of the basic human biases and puts it in relation to sustainability. It's a very interesting article, which taught me a lot about understanding the human factors that will try and help me move people to a more sustainability future. So one of the solutions to the human factors issue is to try and grasp the understanding of humans that we can put together with science and then drive different perspectives. The next, as I touched on before, is automation. There is a lot of manual work being done, and probably the number one issue that is raised by people in sustainability is that there's not enough time, there's too many things happening, there's too many changes, and they simply can't get ahead. It's a classic 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Well, we probably can't change the cycle of new requirements or new reporting rules, but what we can do is get smarter in automation. So there may be a significant advantage in driving automation improvements. The over-reliance on spreadsheets, as I said, is a challenge. The lack of budgets is a challenge. Sometimes some of the solutions might be point solutions, which means they are addressing a particular point, which may mean you may need more than one solution to provide a full suite of sustainability practices. So the solution is budgets first, automation second. But in order to get those budgets and to drive automation in the sustainable practices, we're going to need to show value. The value of those solutions, the value of time, the value of money, and the value of automated solutions that can help streamline at least the data collection and the reporting processes. Also, keep in mind that there is a large amount of solutions out there. So you may need to address a few in order to get the suite that you need. Obviously, Speeki does have software itself. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. but it is one of the broader ones that addresses a number of topics from GHG right through to the sustainability management. So again, getting budgets, getting approvals, and getting automation assistance will be your friend in driving some of these changes. What we have seen is companies being very intuitive when it comes to charging back some of the costs to the business. We've seen lots of companies blend some of the costs of the sustainability management system into other departments, getting support from IT or from marketing or from finance. And again, not necessarily putting it as a sustainability cost, but blending it into other costs, which are somewhat larger, like assurance or perhaps the audit focus. So again, thinking more cleverly around how to get those budgets and how to perhaps charge them back might be a very good use of your time. Finally, when we talk about the right focus, is the final area that people have challenges with. Focusing their attention on the right things, knowing where to focus and making sure that whilst climate change is an important area, it's not completed at the expense of the S and the G. We commonly see in our audits and reviews a gap when it comes to social and governance. And there is an increasingly concern around the gaps of sustainability due diligence. As we know, there is an expectation that sustainability due diligence is important and that we need to end human rights and environmental issues in our supply chain. And that requires a very good understanding of our supply chain, our supply base, our existing suppliers, our new suppliers, the process on which we onboard and qualify suppliers. So it is going to be quite a challenge. And what we've seen is companies need a lot more help in this area than first predicted. We also mentioned the focus before around board and executive levels knowledge. Many companies talk to us about workshops and things to try and build the knowledge set across the executive levels. The knowledge is not always as strong as it should be, especially at the board level. So finding that right task, finding that right focus has been one of the challenges in an ever-increasing world. So again, the secret to the solutions is freeing up your time to focus on the things that matter. And the things that matter will be obviously some of the reporting deadlines, but more importantly, working at the executive levels and the board levels to get that governance structure in place for both E, S, and G. Now that may require you, again, some automation. It may require you to leverage additional people from around the company, for example, using ambassadors or some kind of champions lent from other departments. But there will definitely be a need to invest in time, resources, training, and education so that you can get ahead. Now, a lot of the time that sounds easier said than done, but it may require a bit of a surge in order to get ahead so that you can ultimately come back to a normal pace. So as you think about the right focus, think through how to gain that knowledge, gain that buy-in, gain that support from executives, but at the same time, get the urgent matters done, which you'll need to address most likely through automation. So in the last 5 minutes, we're going to focus on the top 5 things. So we've just talked about some of the challenges and solutions being in the sustainability management role. Now we focus on the top 5. So if you have attended a Speeki webinar before, you'll know that we always end with top 5. These are the top 5 areas that we recommend that you consider as part of your role. They're mainly the things that are front of mind. There may well be additional areas that are beyond the top 5, but these are the areas that we think that you should be focused on in thinking about sustainability management and thinking about your roles in the organization. Firstly, the board and management needs to be a really strong focus. When we're talking with organizations, there is surprisingly quite a lack of knowledge at the board level. And I've written on this topic recently because of the misunderstandings at board levels around ESG and sustainability, which is hardly surprising given a lot of the misinformation that is out there around ESG and some of the overhang information around ESG investing. Most board members haven't had the time or the depth to think more about sustainable practices. They unfortunately tend to adopt the most recent interesting or important thing that they read about, which is often climate and net zero, to the absence of most other areas. Again, finding that time to spend with the board and with senior management will pay off significantly in the future. Getting that organizational culture set from the top, getting the buy-in from the top, getting the knowledge increased at the top will be your friend in the long term. It will take some time and it will take some effort in order to get the screen time with each of these individuals, but it is really money well spent. It is time well spent to do this. So getting to the top levels of the organization would frankly be my number one thing to focus on. It's important to set that benchmark at the top of the organization because you will need these resources to help you be successful in your sustainability management career. Second, if you look at the number of people that are involved on this slide, the CSO touches almost every part of the organization. They touch everything from the front office through to the products team, communications, IT, data, compliance, legal, strategy, internal audit, external audit, board, audit committee. There is a number of people to attach. So when I talk about senior management and the board, what I'm talking about is each of these officers. Each of these people in the organization have a role as part of sustainability. So capturing these individuals and getting them up to speed is the focus. Moving on to the second. The second is, as I mentioned, there is a lot of technology out there. So really looking at whether you're using technology from a GHG accounting side, or whether you're using it as a broader sustainability management, or you're using it for CSRD reporting, or perhaps IFRS reporting, you will need technology solutions. There's no question you will need it. It's a question of getting the budget and the resources to do it, and then making a selection. There are a large number of automation opportunities in the market. And so I would encourage anyone to think through how can we automate some of the data collection, how can we automate some of the reporting, how can we also automate some of the program development, surveys, communication, due diligence, risk assessments, materiality assessments. There's a lot that we can do to automate, especially with new AI technologies. Companies like Speeki and others have built enormous amounts of time with AI built into our platforms, and so a lot of that work has already been done. But there is a lot more to do. So thinking through automation and thinking through how you get that needle moved to free up your time to be more strategic is absolutely key. The third area relates to something I've touched on already, but I'm going to repeat again. In order to make sustainable practices, we need to be thinking about the social, economic, and environmental areas. Thinking about the UN SDGs and thinking about how they looked at the three layers across sustainability is exactly the same here. I often find companies focused on environmental, net zero targets, climate, and GHG. Frankly, focused on GHG to the exclusion sometimes of waste, water, pollution, and biodiversity. Not even getting to some of the areas around the S and the G. But as we know, the S and the G are important in ESG, and also thinking about the effect on people, the human factors, and thinking about the economic, the business factors is absolutely key. So as the saying goes, a corporate strategy that does not consider sustainability is not sustainable, and sustainability that doesn't consider corporate strategy is also not sustainable. The fourth area that I'd focus on is not to underestimate the complexity of supply chain due diligence. It is extremely complex, and I would encourage you not to underestimate it. Sending questionnaires to thousands of suppliers may not end up being your friend. And fifthly, finally, to wrap up today, ongoing education. There is a lot of information and a lot of knowledge to acquire when it comes to ESG and sustainability practices. It's a lot to acquire, a lot to train, and a lot to increase your skills in order to do your roles effectively. We've created the Speeki Academy, which is our solution to help companies and people cross-skill on all of these topics. You can find a lot of information on our website around Speeki Academy, and shortly we will be releasing a much broader academy on a subscription basis for various schools within our academy. One of those schools is the Sustainability Management School. At least 12 courses focused on how to manage your sustainability infrastructure. So we hope that that has brought a help to some of you when looking at your sustainability roles. There is, of course, a lot of information that if you want to reach out, we're happy to help you. If you need something from me, please reach out on the email address below. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for attending this Speeki webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at successive webinars in the future. And in the meantime, keep learning, keep working on automation, and keep working at those board and executive levels. Thanks very much, and it's goodbye from me.